The unexpected war, the Galactic Peace Academy was built on a simple belief. War is behind us. Peace is the future. Hundreds of young cadets trained there every cycle, learning unity, diplomacy, and defense. Among them was a bright alien cadet named Cadet from the Talaris species. He was fast, focused, and proud. He dreamed of becoming a high-ranking officer in the Galactic Peace Fleet. He also believed Earth was overrated. "They call humans warriors," Cadet said during a group briefing. "But they sit in their small blue planet like they're special. I don't get it." Some cadets laughed. Others stayed quiet. Across the room, a human cadet named Private Mark Thorne didn't respond. He just adjusted his notes and continued reading. Karen noticed. "Why don't humans ever argue?" he said louder. "You think you're better?" Mark finally looked up, his eyes calm, serious. "No," he said. "I just think you don't know what you're talking about." That same evening, all cadets were called to the Combat History Theater, a high-security room where real war footage from different planets was stored. The galaxy was peaceful now, but it hadn't always been. For the next training session, the AI instructor had chosen Earth's War Archive, footage labeled Human Conflict, the Age of Fire and Steel. Karen rolled his eyes. "Let's see what all the hype is about." The lights dimmed, the screen lit up, and what followed was not what he expected. Cities burning, soldiers running into explosions, men and women dragging each other across mud and blood, weapons that melted steel, tanks rolling over buildings, mothers crying, children hiding, enemies with no mercy, and humans fighting anyway. Karen leaned forward. He saw battles from Earth's history that no other species had experienced, world wars fought with raw hands and minds, global destruction and then rebuilding, people who had nothing left, still charging forward. And then the final clip played. A single human soldier, wounded, barely standing, stared down a moving tank and refused to step aside. The room was silent when the lights came back on. No one spoke. Even the Bracken cadets, giants of war, looked disturbed. Karen's hands trembled. That was real?" Mark Thorne nodded. "All of it, and that was just 1 century." Karen stood, up slowly. His face had changed. He wasn't proud anymore. He was afraid. He walked straight to the back of the room and spoke quietly to the officer on duty. "I want to file resignation from combat service," he said. The officer blinked. "Cadet. Why?" Karen looked back at the screen. "Because I thought I understood war. But humans survived it. They didn't win with strength. They won by never stopping. I can't fight beside something I don't understand." Later that night, Mark found Karen sitting alone. "You don't have to quit," Mark said quietly. "You just have to learn." Karen looked at him, eyes wide. "You people don't fight because you want to. You fight because you've seen what happens when you stop." Mark nodded once. "That's why we don't argue." The next day, Karen didn't return to battle drills. He asked for transfer to diplomatic training, and every cadet who had watched that footage started looking at humans differently, not because they were louder, but because they were still standing. The cadet who feared peace. Less than humans, after the war footage session, everything changed at the Galactic Peace Academy. The laughter was gone. The arrogance, gone. No one joked about Earth anymore. No one questioned why human cadets were always quiet, especially not Karen. He had officially withdrawn from combat training. His request was unusual, but not denied. Instead of battle drills, Karen now walked the halls of the diplomatic division, where cadets studied history, peace treaties, and planetary psychology. Still, something haunted him. No matter how many peaceful lectures he attended, no matter how many calming meditations he practiced, the images of Earth's war would not leave his mind. One day, his new instructor, a wise Zareth named Vala, stopped him after class. "You're troubled, Karen," she said. Karen nodded. I've never seen that kind of violence, or that kind of strength. Vala tilted her head. Strength? Karen took a breath. Other species fight to win. Humans fight because they've already lost everything before, and yet they still get up. That night, Karen found himself wandering near the old combat training zone. He paused when he saw Mark Thorne, the human cadet, sparring with 3 advanced Bracon warriors. Mark was smaller, slower, but he never stepped back. He moved with purpose. He endured hits without complaint. He stood even when knocked down. And when it ended, the Bracons saluted him. Karen waited until Mark finished, then approached. "I can't stop thinking about the footage," he said. Mark wiped sweat from his forehead. "Most people can't. How did you survive all of that? The pain? The loss?" Mark looked away for a moment, then said, "We didn't survive it. We became it. Earth burned, and we kept walking." The Academy soon organized a debate. Is human warfare a threat or a lesson? Cadets from multiple species were invited to speak. Karen sat silently, unsure if he would participate. Then one Bracon cadet stood and said loudly, "Humans are dangerous. Their violence is unnatural. They're too unstable for peacekeeping." Rolls. Murmurs echoed across the room. Karen's fists clenched, and for the first time since resigning, he stood up. "I watched Earth's history," Karen began, voice steady. "And yes, it's terrifying. But that terror comes with something else. Survival. Not through comfort, not through strength, but through pain and still choosing to protect others." He pointed at the Bracon. "You say they're dangerous. I say they're necessary." Silence followed. Then, a slow nod from a Zareth, a thoughtful hum from a Xerex. Even the Bracon didn't reply. After the debate, Vala called Karen to her office. "You spoke from fear," she said, "but also from respect." Karen lowered his eyes. "I don't know what I am anymore. A soldier? A student? A coward?" Vala smiled gently. "You're someone who saw the fire and didn't run blindly toward it or away from it. You stopped. You thought. That is not cowardice, that is growth." Later, Karen visited the human dormitory and left a short message for Mark. "I still don't fully understand humans, but I think I'm ready to learn." And so, the alien, who once mocked Earth's violence, became one of the first non-human scholars to specialize in human war psychology, because now he believed, to understand peace, you must understand those who fought hardest to find it. The lesson buried in Fire Karen was no longer the same cadet who laughed at Earth. He now spent his days in the human history archives, reviewing old documents, war journals, and survivor interviews. He read about Earth's darkest times, wars that destroyed nations, civil conflicts that tore families apart, nuclear fear, famine, and fire. But always, something survived. The people, the will, the fire inside. One entry stood out. To him, Operation Dawnfall, Battle of Hollow Ridge. Only one unit had survived. A group of 17 soldiers cut off, outnumbered, surrounded for 3 days. No rescue, no food, no sleep. But when the enemy finally entered their position, expecting surrender, they found the humans waiting, standing, guns loaded, silent. Karen sat back in his chair, eyes wide. He muttered, "Why didn't they run?" Mark Thorne, walking past, overheard. "They did," he said quietly. Karen looked confused. "What?" Mark sat beside him. "They ran, out of hope, out of orders, out of time. But they didn't run away. They ran toward the enemy." That line hit Karen harder than any weapon. Later that day, the Peace Academy announced a joint cultural training exercise. Cadets from all species would join squads to study and simulate historical survival scenarios. Karen was placed in a unit with 3 other aliens and 1 human, Mark. The challenge: survive 72 hours in a simulated war zone using only what past human soldiers had used. No AI, no drones, only grit. The simulation began in the cold forests of a digital planet. Rain poured. Supplies were scarce. The team was already arguing within hours. "We should call for extraction," a Xerex cadet shouted. "We'll freeze out here." Another added. Mark remained quiet, adjusting his gear. Karen watched him. "Why aren't you panicking?" he asked. Mark looked up. "Because panic wastes energy, and I've seen worse than fake rain." The team followed Mark's lead. They built a shelter, shared food, took shifts, watched the dark, and by the end of the second day, something changed. They were tired, hungry, scared, but no one complained, because Mark never did. On the final day, a sudden enemy raid hit their camp. Laser fire, explosions, flashing lights. Most cadets dropped to the ground or froze. But Mark stood. And Karen, without thinking, stood beside him. Later, when the simulation ended, the instructor said, "Only one unit lasted all 72 hours without requesting. Early extraction, Unit 7. The room clapped, but Karen wasn't smiling. He was thinking. That night he met with Mark again. "I didn't just study human war," Karen said. "I felt it in there. The cold, the fear, the silence." Mark nodded. "That's how we learned. Not from books, but from getting through the fire." Karen looked down. "It still scares me." Mark didn't laugh. "Good. That means you're learning the real lesson." Karen finally understood. Earth didn't become strong because it wanted war. It became strong because it had no choice. And never gave up. From that day on, Karen made it his mission to translate Earth's wartime experiences into lessons for peace, not to glorify violence, but to teach endurance, leadership, and survival to all species, because hidden in fire was the secret to peace. The human standard. The phrase spread slowly through the academy at first. At first it was a whisper, then it was written on walls, repeated in briefings, cited in lectures. The human standard. It wasn't about physical strength, or better, weapons, or faster ships. It was about something else. Endurance, focus, will. Karen stood at the edge of the training field, watching a new batch of cadets practicing formations. "Why do they all move like humans now?" a young Xerex cadet asked. Karen replied, "Because humans taught us something we didn't know we needed." The cadet tilted her head. "What's that?" "How to stand even when your legs shake. How to lead when you're afraid. How to keep going when everything says quit." Instructors across the academy now used Earth's ancient survival missions as training modules. One Bracon drill sergeant growled at his unit, "Stop crying. You think a human soldier would sit down? Ha! They'd crawl with one leg." Even those who once mocked Earth now spoke of it with respect. Karen spent more time with Mark Thorne, not just as a cadet, but as a friend. They spoke not only of war, but of what came after. The rebuilding, the healing, the quiet pain. "What keeps humans going?" Karen asked one evening. Mark didn't answer right away. Then he said softly, "We don't always know. Sometimes we just take the next step. That's enough." The Academy announced a new honor, the Endurance Ribbon, awarded to any cadet, regardless of species, who demonstrated extraordinary courage under pressure. Its design? A small silver flame, based on Earth's last resistance symbol from a war Karen once studied. One day, during a harsh training operation, a storm hit mid-simulation. Most cadets scattered for cover. But one group stayed out, guarding their supply, crates from simulated enemy units. They were led by a soft-spoken human female named Sergeant Ren Morales. After the storm, an instructor asked her why she didn't call retreat. She replied, "Because humans never assume help is coming. We become the help." The room fell silent. Another name added to the growing legend of Earth. At a council briefing, high-ranking officials debated the future of interspecies defense. One of them asked, Should we allow humans to lead more than just training? Karen, invited as a guest speaker, stood. He looked around the large chamber and said calmly, "You want peace? Then stop fearing the ones who endured war. Give them a place not because they're human, but because they remind the rest of us how to survive." By the end of the session, it was approved. Human cadets would now serve as resilience instructors across the entire Galactic Cadet program. Back at the academy, Karen found a note in his locker. It was unsigned, but the handwriting was familiar. "You feared us once. Now you carry the lesson. That makes you stronger than most." Karen placed the note inside his datapad, next to the war footage he once watched in horror. He no longer feared it. Now, he understood it. He understood why humans sit quietly, why they don't speak unless it matters, why they move only when it counts. Because for them, every movement came from history. Every silence held memory. Every breath was borrowed from someone who didn't make it. And that became the new standard for every species who wanted to lead. Don't boast. Don't beg. Stand. The flame they couldn't extinguish war had returned, this time not in simulation. A rogue faction from deep space had launched surprise attacks on outer colonies. Ships were vanishing. Bases were being overrun. And once again the galaxy realized something important. Peace is not permanent, and courage is not common. At the Peace Academy, cadets were called back into active duty. The training was over. Now it was real. Karen stood in the deployment bay, preparing for his first field assignment. His fingers trembled slightly as he zipped up his vest. Mark Thorne stood beside him, calm as always. "You scared?" Karen asked. Mark glanced at him. "Of course." That surprised Karen. "But you've been through worse." Mark looked him in the eye. "That's why I'm scared. Because I know what can happen. But I go anyway. That's the difference." The mission was simple on paper: evacuate a research base before enemy forces arrived. But when the dropship landed, the situation was already collapsing. Smoke filled the sky. Communication signals were jammed. Panic was everywhere. Karen's squad hesitated outside the burning gates. "What do we do?" someone shouted. The commanding officer had gone missing. Then Mark stepped forward. No rank, no orders. He said nothing. He just moved. Karen followed. So did the others. Because now they understood. If the human was moving, it was time to move. Inside, the base researchers were trapped, frightened. Mark directed teams to clear exits, stabilize wounded, restore power. Karen found a young alien child hiding under debris. He pulled them free, hands bleeding. "You're okay," he whispered. "We've got you." Suddenly, an explosion rocked the lower deck. A section collapsed. Mark and two others were trapped beneath rubble. Dust, fire, and silence. "Get help," someone cried. Karen ran back toward the smoke. Others tried to stop him. "It's too dangerous." But Karen kept running, because he remembered who ran toward the fire when he couldn't, and now it was his turn. He reached the collapsed hallway. Mark was pinned, conscious but hurt. "Didn't I tell you to follow orders?" Mark said, coughing. Karen laughed, tears in his eyes. "You never gave one. You just stood up. So now I do too." Together they got out. When the rescue ship took off, every evacuee was safe. 0 deaths. Mission success. Back at base, the footage spread fast. An alien cadet running into smoke. A human leading with quiet resolve. A team that acted as one. Across training centers and news feeds, one phrase repeated again and again: the flame couldn't be put out. The Galactic Council held a ceremony days later. Karen was honored with the Endurance Ribbon, the highest cadet award. But he didn't take full credit. He held it in his hands and said, "I was once afraid of Earth's fire, but now I carry a spark of it, and I will never let it die." Mark, seated in the front row, smiled faintly. No words, just pride. From that moment on, A new phrase was added to training manuals galaxy-wide. In every unit, ensure one carries the flame. If none can, find a human. The day the galaxy saluted Earth, the rescue mission had changed everything. For the first time in history, every major galactic news network showed the same image. An alien cadet carrying a human soldier out of the smoke. Both bloodied, both alive, both standing. The galaxy had witnessed wars before, but this time it witnessed something different. Not power. Not victory, but unbreakable will. The Galactic Council, long divided on Earth's role, now stood united. They held an emergency session to discuss defense leadership, and this time, no one laughed when Earth's name came up. One elder from the Varnak system stood and said, "For generations we called humans unstable, but it was our fear that made us blind. They didn't start the fire, they walked through it." The vote passed. Earth was officially invited to lead the Coalition Resilience Division, a force designed not to attack, but to stand when all others fell. Back at the Peace Academy, a formal parade was organized, not for victory, but for recognition. Not to show power, but to show honor. Karen stood in the front line with cadets of every species. He wore a new badge, a silver flame. Beside him stood Mark Thorne, still recovering, arm in a sling. The human was quiet, as always. But this time, the galaxy wasn't. As the ceremony began, something unexpected happened. Across the viewing decks, cadets and commanders stood and raised their hands to the sky. Not in salute to rank, but in salute to Earth. The gesture spread, planet to planet, station to station, old enemies, former rivals, neutral worlds. All performed the same silent gesture, one hand to the chest, one hand in the air. A salute that meant, we remember, we endure, we rise together. A single banner was raised above the Academy, larger than any species flag, for those who burned and still marched forward. After the event, Mark and Karen sat in the Academy garden once more. "I never thought I'd see this day," Karen whispered. Mark nodded slowly. "Neither did we. We were always just surviving." Karen looked at him, a soft smile on his face. "Now you're leading more than just battles. You're leading hearts." Across New Academy's Earth's war archives were no longer locked behind security clearance. They were taught, not to scare, but to remind. This is what happens when the will to survive becomes stronger than fear. Alien instructors told cadets, "Don't study humans to become them. Study them to understand what it means to never give up." One young trainee, shaking during a test, asked her instructor, "Why do I feel afraid?" The instructor replied, "Because you're alive. But remember what the humans showed us. You can be afraid and still move forward." The flame had spread, not as destruction, but as hope, and its source Earth. The species who taught us all to stand years passed. The Peace Academy became the most respected institution in the galaxy. New buildings were added, new species enrolled. Old walls were covered with symbols of unity, but one symbol was everywhere. A small silver flame, the human standard. Karen, now an instructor, stood before his new class of cadets. They came from every system: Bracon, Xerex, Tolaris, and yes, Earth. He looked at them with calm eyes, then said, "You were told peace is easy, that war is old, but peace is a choice, and choices must be protected." He tapped the flame pin on his chest. "That is not about Earth, it's about what Earth taught us." He told them stories, not just of Mark Thorne or the war footage, but of all the quiet humans who rose during the worst moments. The nurse who ran into gunfire to carry a child, the engineer who repaired a shield generator with broken fingers, the captain who refused to leave a single crew member behind. One cadet asked, "Why do humans still stay silent when praised?" Karen replied, "Because they carry pain too deep for words. and because they don't lead for attention. They lead so others don't fall. On Earth, statues were never built for warriors who screamed. They were built for the ones who held the line when all others fell. In orbit around the Academy, a new station was launched. Its name, Fort Endure, its purpose: to train future leaders, not in strength but in resistance, unity, and hope. And written above its main entrance, for the species who taught us all to stand. Mark Thorne, now older and decorated, visited Fort Endure during its dedication. He stood at the edge of the ceremony, quiet as always. When a council member offered him the mic, he declined. But before leaving, he gave a note to Karen. It simply read, "If they fall, help them up. If they break, stand in their place. If they forget, remind them. You don't need to be loud to be strong." Karen placed the note in a display case next to the flame pin, a datapad with Earth's war footage, and a cracked helmet from the original simulation. It became the most visited exhibit on Fort Endure. Now, whenever a young cadet feared failure, feared pain, or felt weak, they would visit the flame. And they would remember. A single species from a small blue planet who faced the worst and never stopped standing. The end.